Holy shit. Holy shit. Holy shit. Holy shit.
Neon going back to the Scar Mesa.
Humans find that an admirable trait.
Dominating.
Hello, fellow Auraxians. Today I want to talk to you about construction. Now, I did a tutorial on this when construction first came out, and with the recent changes, a lot of pieces to that are now outdated. But I'm going to leave it up because it still covers the very basics of how to get an ant, how to mine cordium, how to deploy an ant, how to start your base. So in this video, we're going to assume you know the basics. If you don't, go back and watch version 1. If you already have a little bit of experience in construction, this will bring you up to speed on all the new changes and updates. Now to begin, we're actually going to start before this patch. Roughly 6 months ago, they added vehicle capture points in the open field with the intention of them being construction-based points. So it is technically now possible to build a base on top of a capture point. The idea here is to make construction more relevant. Rather than being forced into playing a base that you've played 100 times already, you can build your own base around one of these points and kind of have a new emergent experience there. So you can look for one of those places on the map for an opportunity to build a base that kind of helps give your faction a stronghold around a point. And then I want to comment on one minor change before we dive into the big stuff. They increased the cost of cordium silos up to 2,000 cordium, but the silo starts with 2,000 cordium in it. So they have effectively made the cordium silo cost 0. One little trick here is when you're out mining for the first time to start your base, get a little bit of cordium, buy your silo, then hop back in the ant and fill it up to its 10,000 maximum. That way when you start your base, you're effectively starting with 12,000 cordium, if you have a maxed out ant, and that includes having your silo. What this does is it makes it a lot quicker and easier to get your base up and running. With the recent patch changes, they've reduced the cost of a lot of items, but increased the upkeep. They're trying to shift the burden of the base not to the front end, but to maintaining it while the base is already in place. Okay, let's dive in. Just as a reminder, if you don't already own all the construction modules, you can go to the depot, click on the construction tab, and you can view everything that's available. Let's do a quick review of the items because some of them have moved around in the categories, a few new things have been added, and hives have been removed. As before, you can pull items either from a silo or from the back of a deployed ant. The core tab houses the two most basic elements of your base. The silo, which stores your cordium and powers all the units in your base, and the Elysium spawn tube. Remember, when you construct one of these tubes, make sure you walk up to it and press the E button to bind to it so you can spawn to it from anywhere on the map. You can do this before the module is completely built. Next is the module tab. There have not been significant changes to these items. They did normalize the radius on these items, and they removed some of the exclusion zones. So you can place your modules closer together in a base rather than having to have them spread out, causing a lot of clutter. The shield module has changed in that it's no longer required to provide shields on certain buildings like the Sunderer Garage. It now also has a defensive mechanism that you can activate to provide increased durability for items affected by it for a short period of time. There were no serious changes to the structures tab. They did spruce up some of the models, adding lights to the infantry tower and taking the annoying prongs off the ramp. So the ramp is more rampy now. The defense tab houses all of the turrets and all of the walls. There were some minor tweaks to turret stats, but they still work in the same manner as you remember. Now on to the big one. The tactical tab is where the real meat of this patch happened, with a major focus on making some changes to the orbital strike and making it more relevant to the battlefield. It now charges to its maximum 800 meter radius in 15 minutes, down from roughly an hour. It also is no longer limited by no construction zones. That means yes, you can now nuke a base.
Triple homicide. Quadruple homicide.
First, let's talk about avoiding an orbital strike. The blast radius of incoming orbital strikes is marked on your minimap. There are some visual elements in-game, and they are announced with an audio cue, both friendly and enemy. You can survive orbital strikes as long as you are not in a vehicle, and you are inside, not near a doorway. So if you hear and see an orbital strike coming, take a look at your minimap and make sure you get out of the blast radius. If you can't get out of the blast radius, ditch any vehicles you have and make sure you are indoors. You will still get EMP'd, but you are able to survive it in that situation. Okay, let's talk about bringing the pain. That is calling down an orbital strike. First, you're going to need to build a base. I'm approaching my base here, and you'll notice it's not huge. Really, all you need is a silo and an orbital strike uplink. But those can get taken out pretty easily, so add some defenses if you want. You'll notice I pulled an Empire-specific fighter with ejection seat, and I'm running as an infiltrator with Stalker Cloak. You can do this with any class. Having the benefit of Cloak just makes it really easy. I run over to my orbital strike uplink, and I grab the uplink tool. This will land in your inventory as your last weapon slot. Now I'm watching the yellow circle, which is the range of my orbital strike, and I'm flying over to a base I want to hit with it. When you are looking through the scope on the orbital strike tool, it's sort of like looking through infrared, and it blacks out after a very short range. You cannot shoot your dart into the range that you cannot see. Now in this case, I've landed basically right in the center of where I'm going to shoot. You don't have to be that close. Just keep in mind that if you don't get a message in your chat log that says your name called down an orbital strike, it means you are out of range and you're going to have to get closer and try again. But if you do get that message, make sure you clear the area and get ready for the carnage.
Kill.
Humans find that an admirable trait.
Rampage. The serial killer. Holy shit.
Humans find that an admirable trait. I honestly, truly didn't think you'd allow that to happen.
Murder spree.
That part is easy enough to do. Now let's think about where you want to use the orbital strike. First of all, orbital strikes are the ultimate counters to other orbital strikes. If someone else has an orbital strike growing within range of your base, make sure you put it down before it gets too much range. That is a game of whoever strikes first wins. Because when an orbital strike hits a base, there is literally nothing left. Now, while I do a lot of my orbital striking from ESFs with ejection seats, there's nothing that says you have to do that. An Ant with Cordium and the cloaking ability works really well. A Flash with the Wraith cloaking module also works really well. Now, these orbital strikes can be used very strategically. You'll notice here the VS have a 7% population advantage, and they're 45 seconds away from capturing the base. I'm going to place my orbital strike where I expect it to hit their spawning Sundra, and disrupt their flow of forces into that A point. So even though I'm not going to kill the guys that are in the base, I'm really going to force all the VS out of the fight to scramble around to try to escape. You'll notice we flipped the point before the strike even hit. And the ones that I don't kill, I still get a solid EMP on to assist my fellow Terrans in pushing in. Auraxius has never seen a weapon with so much potential for a single person to do so much damage since the new orbital strike. I see a lot of good and bad in the new orbital strike, and we'll talk balance in a different video. But one thing I can tell you is, man, it is good for mine and salt. On that note, while it's fun to troll enemies, be very careful of your allies here. I spent some time here trying to get my orbital strike deep into the biolab, so it wouldn't be at all in range of my allies on the pad. Unfortunately, I didn't have the power to reach that far into the biolab right away. You can see that message there. With a little bit of patience, I was able to get the dart launched deeper into the biolab. But the outer edge of my orbital strike still clipped the edge of the biolab pad. Now my hope is that my friendlies would either move to the back of the pad or take the 2 jump pads to escape temporarily. But here's the thing, guys. Assume everyone's an idiot. And my failure to assume that meant that a whole bunch of my friendlies went for a nice little ride off the biolab pad. And I ended up netting more friendly kills than enemy kills. So remember, with great power comes great responsibility. Use the orbital strikes wisely. Alright, the next big addition in this patch was the routing spire. Once you place a routing spire in your base, you can walk up to it and pull a routing pad from it. This is a deployable spawn point. I recommend using it in conjunction with the light air terminal, as the item does not stay with you if you die or redeploy. After you pull one of the pads out, you can then pull an ESF or a Valkyrie and fly to the location where you intend to deploy it. It will show up as your last weapon, and the weapon icon will look like an Elysium spawn tube. This small pad can be deployed anywhere as long as it does not conflict with other objects. It can be deployed on the roofs of the buildings in a biolab. It can be deployed within Sundra no deploy zones. Any friendly that is dead within 100 meters of this spawn point can use it. One drawback to these pads is it does take longer to spawn here than, say, a base or a Sunderer. So building a small base to support a routing spire, an Elysium spawn tube, and a light aircraft terminal is a great way to use construction to support the fights. A new item that was added with this patch is the Pain Spire. It effectively adds a no-go zone to your base by creating an area around the spire that causes damage to any enemies that enter it. The floating skulls you see here represent the zone created by the Pain Spire that enemies can't enter without taking damage. The next game-changing item in Construction version 2 is the Flail. It is the counterpart to the Glaive IPC, but while the Glaive is for taking things down like the Sky Shield and peeling back the defenses on a base, the Flail is the hammer that can actually wipe things out, doing large, high explosive, and anti-armor damage. The major plus of the Flail is it has no charge time. The moment it is built, you can walk up to it, grab a targeting device, and it's ready to go. The major negative is it cannot target locations within no build zones. That means vehicles hanging out near bases are out of range of this device. There must be an AI module within range in order for the Flail to work. Once it's constructed, go up to it and pull out the laser designator. It will land in your inventory as your last weapon slot. The laser designator is hip-fired, and every time it is fired, it overheats. It has a roughly 15-second cooldown, and that is the next time you can call down an artillery strike from the Flail. The targeted location has an icon on the map and minimap, and green smoke emanates from it. And you can hear a very ominous whistling sound of artillery as it nears its destination.
I honestly, truly didn't think you'd allow that to happen.
Triple homicide.
The two major counters for this weapon are no construction zones around bases, and the Sky Shield module. But without protection from either of those items, these things are devastating. In the distance, you can see a personal waypoint, and that is on my base where I'm charging an orbital strike. And the enemies have wisely set up a base nearby where they're trying to get a Glaive IPC and the Flail up and running to take down my base. Now my orbital strike is almost in range, but I need to save that to defend myself from other orbital strikes. So I can use my Flail to go out and try to get their artillery down before it can take my base out. Whereas the orbital to strike uplink is kind of a one and done, I use it and redeploy. With the Flail, you can go out in the field and stay out there with just the targeting device for extended operations. Generally, I use a flash with a Wraith cloaking module along with an infiltrator and a stalking cloak. I find some nice cover where I'm far enough away that I'm not easily noticed, but still am close enough to take easy shots. Even though this tool mimics a laser designator, it actually fires much more like the recon dart of an infiltrator. There is a little bit of drop to the projectile this designator fires. Once you're downrange with one of these tools, there's very little that can stop you. The Flail does large damage to infantry, vehicles, and construction objects alike. As long as your base stays powered and your Flail has a AI module nearby, you can designate targets indefinitely. And it is a terrific way to keep your base defended while your orbital strike charges. To avoid getting flailed, you need to do a few simple things. A is move out of the area designated on your minimap when a Flail is incoming, marked with a circle with 3 fireballs in it. B is get your Sky Shield up first. In this case, they were trying to do an IPC and a Flail without being noticed. Unfortunately, that gave me enough time to pound them with my Flail before they got their Sky Shield up. Now I want to pause for a second and talk about personal waypoints. I use these extensively while I'm working with construction. And it's not about knowing how to get back to my base. I can figure that out. The key part about placing a personal waypoint is it shows you the distance to that waypoint. Now I'm going to give you some numbers, but these are always subject to change. Please read the patch notes to know what those numbers at the time you're watching this video. The orbital strike range is 800 meters. The Flail range is 600 meters. You cannot deploy orbital strikes within 500 meters of another orbital strike. So while I'm using construction, I am constantly placing personal waypoints, so I can tell things like where I should place my silo. There's nothing worse than placing a silo, get some defensive structures set up, and then realize you can't place an orbital strike in your base because you're only 400 meters away from another friendly one. Same with the Flail. When I'm out there running around, I know I have a 600 meter range with my Flail. So with this base, you'll see I'm having some trouble designating targets. I know I am right at the edge of my Flail's range because I'm looking at my personal waypoint. So I'm intentionally missing my target a little bit so I can still shoot a flail and hit my target with the area effect damage. The construction objects generally don't have good feedback as to why they're not working. So if you're ever having trouble using any of these objects, the first thing is to check and make sure you have cordium in your silo, everything's powered properly, and the AI module is installed correctly. If it's not one of those things, it probably has to do with your range, and start using your personal waypoints to figure it out. So that's the last big new item. The vehicle ammo, and air terminals were put under the support tab. Not many changes to them per se, but they have removed the nanite charge for pulling vehicles from bases. Now, vehicles pulled from bases only require cordium. Okay guys, that'll do it for this tutorial on Construction version 2. Hopefully that brought you up to speed on the major changes. The major takeaway is the construction has been removed in terms of meta objectives, that is removing hives from the game. And it now has much more of support roles. Orbital striking bases, hitting armor columns with the flail, and bringing router pads to the bases to improve the attacker's spawn points. It still has a way to go, but I can definitely say that this is a massive step in the right direction. Construction version 2 is tons and tons more fun than the original version of Construction. So if you're bored of the same old grind, I highly encourage you to check it out. It's a pretty cool and humbling experience to go grab your ant, mine a little bit of cordium, get a silo down, and start a small base. Then go downrange for a while, use your orbital strike, use your flail, and then come back to see your base is developed into this massive metropolis. All your friendlies have tagged into it, dropped their turrets and their sky shields. It's now a huge sprawling base that's larger than a lot of the existing bases in the game. In the future, I'll dive into kind of the battle discussion and how it works with the overall battle flow, where there still is a lot of work to be done. If you have any extra questions on construction that I didn't answer here, please don't hesitate to leave a comment with that question. There's a lot of awesome veteran players that drop by, and they will probably get an answer to you even before I can. If you like these kind of tutorial videos, please make sure you share the love by spreading it around, hitting the like button, or subscribing if you haven't yet. That's all for now, fellow Auraxians. And until next time, I will see you Planetside.